Good afternoon, and welcome to the Calix webinar, How to Increase Lasting Loyalty by Offering What Your Customers Want. I'm Susan Friedman from Calix. Before we get started, here's a few tips on using the Zoom console and how you can engage with us during the webinar. At the bottom of your screen, there's a toolbar. Click on the Q&A button to ask our panelists questions. Use the chat button for technical issues or if you'd like to share your thoughts and reactions to the conversation. Under the Resources button, you'll find speaker bios and links to additional information. During the webinar, we will have a few poll questions. Thank you for your participation in these polls. They really help us shape the conversation. Today's session is being recorded. I'll replay the link and we'll send it to all registrants. With that, I'll hand it over to Susan Higgins, who will introduce our speakers. Let's get started.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to apologize. There's an alarm going off behind me, but thank you everyone for joining us today. We're so excited to have you with us for this webinar. And thank you to any of our returning attendees who were here for our session on November 19th. If you missed that, you can always catch the replay on calix.com. Again, our goal for you is to leave this session with practical, actionable ideas that you and your marketing teams can put to work right away. We hope you'll start to see positive results immediately. So I am delighted to introduce our two wonderful speakers today. We have Christina Coretta, who is a Senior Success Engagement Manager. She specializes in engagement cloud strategy and adoption. She has over 10 years of experience in broadband marketing and go-to-market strategy. Christina partners with many marketers to help them optimize and execute their plans. She also served as a marketing director, leading teams, running marketing campaigns, and developing strategies for member engagement and lead generation. And we have Gabe Peterson, who is the Global Director of Field Strategy at Calix. And Gabe works directly with broadband service providers to drive data-driven marketing success. With 25 years in the telecommunications industry and 20 of those happily at Calix, Gabe brings a wealth of experience to this conversation. He also co-hosts the Buffering podcast, which is all about helping broadband service providers move their businesses forward through thoughtful conversations. I encourage everyone to check that out. And with that, I'll hand things over to Christina and Gabe. Please take it away.
Thank you so much, Susan. I appreciate the very kind intros there. So as we jump into the agenda today, just wanted to give a quick overview of the things that Christina and I are going to hit on. So we want to start a bit with the competitive landscape. And we talked a little bit about this in the webinar that we did a couple of weeks ago, but we want to go a little bit deeper into that, specifically as it relates to loyalty and driving loyalty within your business. Then we're going to get into some very specific actions that you all can take. As Susan said, we really want you to be able to walk away from the conversation today with things that you can tangibly take back to your day-to-day. And so Christina is going to help us by reviewing some of those loyalty drivers that you can activate now. We're also going to provide some examples around marketing, what we would call smarter, not harder. Being really focused on specific actions that you can take, data-driven actions that you can take within your business that will drive the next item here, which is specifically metrics that matter, driving success by understanding what's happening in the business and making sure that the actions and activities that you're doing are actually driving that success. And then lastly, just wrap things up with kind of some really specific next steps to take away here. We do have a few resources that are available in the webinar as well. One of the things that we really wanted to do as we were going through this presentation was provide some prompts that you can use from an AI perspective to do some of the heavy lifting around some of the actions that we're talking about. That could be competitive research, that could be website research, or analyzing your website for better results, those sorts of things. So there's a handful of items that are in the resources section of the webinar today. You can take those, you can drop them into your favorite AI tool, and get some results and have the computers do the heavy lifting for you versus you having to do all of this research yourself. So I just wanted to mention that as we're getting into the competitive discussion. So let's talk competitive landscape. And Susan Friedman, if we could kick off our first poll here while I'm just going through this slide. I just wanted to kind of level set around the the difference in the competitive landscape and how rapidly it's evolving. And we have a question here just around, how frequently you're actually going out and researching your competition. And I think there's a balance here. You don't want to get too wrapped around the axle where every single day you're going out and looking at what your competitors are doing. But it is important on a regular cadence to have a good understanding of what's going on with your competition. We see the tier ones evolving their strategy, being more aggressive from a pricing perspective, being more aggressive with locking in customers for longer term contracts. We certainly see a lot of changes with the 5G and the satellite providers, which we're going to talk about. And as AI just continues to rapidly change everything that we're doing, all of this is going to happen faster. Susan, can we see the results of that poll, please? Okay, interesting. Pretty much everybody in that quarterly bucket. All right, so most folks in the quarterly bucket, which is great. I think that's a good frequency. I'm very happy to see that nobody was never, so that's good. Christine, I'd be curious to hear your perspective here, but I kind of feel like quarterly is a good best practice of not so much that it's taking all of your time, but but still staying up to date on everything that's happening.
Yep, I think that gives good insight to maybe the marketing campaign from your competition for each quarter too, so you can get a better pulse on how stuff changes as the seasons and time of year change too.
That's a really good point around, what is it that they're pushing at that particular time of year? Yeah, what is it, a back to school campaign? Is it a holiday campaign? Those sorts of things. So yeah, that's a really good point. I did mention mention the prompts. There is a very detailed one that Christina put together, where you can simply change out the specific location that you want to do competitive analysis for, at the top of that prompt, and then it's got a really detailed readout of what's happening with your competitors, what they're offering, what speeds they're pushing, what prices they're leaning into. Are they doing promotions? Are they charging for managed Wi-Fi? Are there hidden fees? All kinds of all there's a lot in there that it's going to give you a really detailed analysis of what's happening with your competitors. So if you are doing that quarterly research, that's awesome. If you want to use AI to make that a little bit easier for you, Christina's got a great prompt that she created to do that for you. So let's talk a little bit about what we're seeing in the market. So we wanted to call out Spectrum here, and a couple of the other providers. One of the things we've seen recently is Spectrum actually leaning into this free internet forever campaign, which seems wild, but this is how competitive the landscape is getting. And in order to get free internet forever, you do have to sign up for a Spectrum mobile service. And there are a couple of options, as you can see there on the screen, to upgrade into higher end services, 500 meg or 1 gig for a relatively low cost per month as well. So again, this is how aggressive we're seeing some of the larger national providers get. The larger cable providers are losing subscribers. They've been on a downward trend for quite some time, so they're starting to get very aggressive about how they bring new subscribers into the fold. The other the other competitors that we're seeing get more aggressive is folks like Starlink. So in some areas of the United States, they've rolled out a new tier that's below the tiers that they've been selling previously. It's a 100 meg service and it's priced only at $40 a month. So they're starting to get more aggressive in certain parts of the country where they have additional capacity, and that's only going to continue to grow as Starlink continues to push these services into more areas of the US and broadly across the world. And sort of speaking of the space invaders, so we talked about Starlink there, but just to go into this, not only about Starlink, but also what we're seeing on the Amazon side is, Starlink certainly has a direct line to a huge number of users, as well as starting to get more aggressive from a pricing perspective in the services that they're offering. On the Amazon side, we're just seeing, used to be called Project Kuiper, now has been renamed to Amazon Leo. Not sure that I love that name, but that's neither here nor there. But certainly what we see there is the risk of Amazon coming in and being much more aggressive as this product really launches fully to market. And we've seen a number of providers rolling out Eero into their customers' homes, which we see as a big risk. They're letting Amazon into their customers' homes, and that relationship is really being managed by Amazon. There was a really interesting study that was done earlier this year from one of our partners, Innovative, as well as another go-to-market partner of ours, Pivot Group, where they went out and did some analysis and a survey across the country, asking people who are living in rural markets a bunch of questions. And the one of the really interesting results here, I thought, was the Amazon questions that were asked. So they asked how many people were already subscribed to Amazon Prime. You can see that on the left, 54%. So a huge percentage of people are already using that application, are already using Amazon Prime. I think most of us on this call are probably using Amazon, even if it's not the video services, certainly from a Prime perspective for free shipping and all of the things that make our lives way more convenient. But the number that really jumped out to me here was 44% would consider switching if Amazon added home internet into Amazon Prime. And that to me is a massive risk. If we're seeing that people want that bundled service, even if it's a lesser than service, there's still going to be those folks who are interested in moving to that. Yes, satellite obviously is not the same as some of the other technology that we see our customers using, but if it's a good enough service and if it's easy to buy and bundled into Prime and is a really low cost, there's going to be folks who jump at that. And the 44% number really jumped out to me in that survey. Christina, I think I'll hand it over to you here to talk through kind of what we're seeing from a go to. Actually, no, I take that back. I lied. I'm going to hand it over to you in a couple of slides. Let me talk through this one really quick, and then I'll hand it over to you. So what we're seeing in the market is really broadband service providers look to move up this chart or this scale to move out of that short-term vulnerability area and into long-term viability, offering different services, moving away from just the basic broadband provider, the basic managed Wi-Fi provider, or even the basic managed service provider if you're delivering services that include an app. Those are really table stakes at this point, and we're seeing our customers who are really driving success and long-term value in their business thinking deeply about the types of services and frankly the way that they're framing those services up. And this is a example that we used in the webinar a couple of weeks ago, and I'm not going to make everybody go through and do the survey again, but I thought it was really interesting kind of taking a step back out of our industry and looking at a different industry that we don't think about all of the time, and that was the banking industry. So we grabbed this example from a banking a local banking provider. They had four different options for their savings accounts, and we did a survey and asked the customers that were on that webinar which one of these that they would choose. And miraculously, this worked out so well for me, and I laughed when we saw the results of this initially. It was a perfect distribution across those results. People, 25% of the people chose primary savings, 25% chose advantage savings, so on and so forth. So what this really proved to me is when we take a step back, we move out of an industry that we're all familiar with, that we work in every single day. If we're trying to lean into the technical specifications and the really nitty-gritty details of the product that we're selling, we get confused. That's the same thing that happens with our customers when we're leaning into the technical aspects of the things that we're trying to sell to them. So it's again so important as you think about the competitive landscape to really take that step back and think deeply about how am I framing up these services for my customers? Because you don't want a situation where customers get confused and they just choose randomly whatever option is listed here, which may not necessarily be the best option for them. Okay, now I will hand it over to Christina to talk through some of these other items. Let me build this slide out, Christina, and I will let you go.
Thanks. So, still keeping it outside of our industry for a different perspective, but talking about technology, let's talk about the shift into ride sharing. So, we all started with the traditional taxi. They were doing all of the things until Uber came into the market, which totally disrupted everything. Taxi drivers didn't know what to do. Everybody was up in arms of who's Uber? Why are they doing so well? Why is everybody using them? um, Talking about convenience, what type of vehicle you would prefer to sit into. You can indicate if you want to chat or not to your driver, really making it more customized to how you want to travel. Then came into play a second competitor, Lyft, and they have pretty much dominated the market until about a year ago, where we see the shift to Waymo. They're available in larger cities like San Francisco. Within the first year, they went from 0 to 25% market share, which is insane. So that's a company backed by Google, and their ride sharing service. We're also seeing a shift towards the self-driving with Tesla's robot taxi. So making it automated, totally changing the way that ride sharing is evolving and able to be taken advantage of. Gabe and I were talking before this call about even the safety aspects of taking Waymo and accidents versus taking a Lyft or taxi drastically different. So there are all sorts of impacts that this has for the market. So looking at the ride sharing example and how would it translate to you? So Waymo's future forward thinking, right? They're thinking ahead, bringing in automations, the latest and greatest tech, and making it futuristic experience for the user. And they're leveraging AI and automation to really make processes quicker and more efficient with ride booking, sharing, getting from point A to B. And they have that safety and trust. So that kind of is their core differentiator as well as technology. So if you think about Waymo, how can you switch these three categories to you as a provider? So thinking future forward, how are you defining what you offer today, right? It's so much beyond just, a cable connecting to your computer. How are you redefining connectivity and what connectivity means for your everyday lifestyle? So how are you allowing them to incorporate into what they're doing, right? Are they able to do telehealth now if you're more rural? Are they able to work from home now? Or in my husband's use case, finally have that smart home that he's been dreaming of. Who knew they made devices for garages to make them smart? Um, Looking at autonomy and intelligence, right? So making sure that you are optimizing your systems, really leaning into customer experience. That is the huge differentiation between you and some of the larger guys like Starlink and Verizon, for example. You guys are the boots on the ground and you have that locality that's really hard to replicate. And then we can't forget incorporating AI into your everyday use cases as well as running your business. Leaning into safety and trust, how are you protecting your subscribers behind the scenes, right? So what's behind that magic curtain? Network security, right? So if you have something like Protect IQ where you're blocking viruses, threats, and intrusions, how are you speaking, promoting, and educating on that? How reliable is your network? How are you providing peace of mind to your subscribers, right? Are you offering parental controls, right? So they can have healthy online habits that form. So a lot of different categories and messaging and even play on words to highlight things that you're probably already doing today. So all of this kind of leans into the value of loyalty. So looking at the difference of acquiring a new subscriber versus retaining one, it is around 7 times more expensive to get a new subscriber. Loyalty also by retaining, you're decreasing cost by 10%. And the probability of scale, right? So what is the probability that an existing customer will upsell or take on a new service that you're offering? And then that all leads into lifetime value, right? Better experience, higher satisfaction. They're more likely to continue to upsell, cross-sell, and really they're sticky, right? So they're going to stay for a long time, tell your friends about you, be your number one advocate. So, what are some loyalty drivers that you can do today, or maybe you're already doing some of these? The first one to consider leaning into is a referral program. This is a very cost-efficient way to get leads. It keeps your customers engaged. It helps with word of mouth, which yes, people look at reviews, but you're more inclined to, trust Gabe in a conversation because he had a good experience than a random review on Google. Um, And it's a quick win, right? You can make it personalized. You can reach out to your subscribers with an email or maybe a push notification through Command IQ or maybe a text message. It can include things like tips, updates, and offers. So really, what's in it for them and you, right? You get new subscribers at a cheaper cost, and it also helps with that lifetime value because you might be offering some sort of incentive, right? I've seen a lot of varieties of $10 to $50 account credits for both the subscriber and the new customer. I've seen larger scale contests where the subscriber that refers the most people throughout the year will get free internet for all of the following year. So there's a lot of ways that this can have an impact that is low cost and it's going to eventually lead to quality and long-term subscribers. I've got a stat here on the right hand of the screen from MailChimp, just leaning into advocacy, but 72% of people with a positive experience are going to share their story with six or more people.
The cost piece of this, Christina, is such a great point.
Yeah.
A $10 or $20, even a $50 credit to have somebody go out and do the selling for you, that is
Hmm.
very low cost of acquisition. We work in an industry where the cost of acquisition is usually, the average is sometimes $500, $600 to acquire a new customer. So if you're, having to throw a bill credit at an existing customer for 20 or $50 a month, that is a very inexpensive way to acquire a new customer. And to your point, can be very low effort as well.
Hmm.
All right, moving on to the next one.
Yeah, let's talk about nurture campaigns. So, as marketers in general, from the start of the internet, we have all done a very good job of brand awareness to get leads to convert to subscribers. However, a lot of us are guilty of not nurturing those relationships. So, we maybe have a touch point here or there throughout the lifetime value of maybe asking for them to spend more money. Um, there are a lot of things that we can do to remind them the value add that you provide them as their provider. Yes, we can have offers and upsells and cross sells with different incentives. We talked about a referral program that would be good to consider. But there are other things that you can consider, right? Maybe you do a monthly or quarterly Wi-Fi report talking about what their experience was with you in the last quarter. So if you are a Calix customer, you can do custom data points to tell them what type of data usage they're having, how much data usage, and really make it personalized, which is something we talked about on the last webinar of how customers are almost expecting personalization at this point. So there are tons of different options. It doesn't have to be, something every month, but we'll dive into this a little bit more. But what touch points are you having with your current subscribers today? Long-term goal, it's going to educate them, remind them why they chose you, and it's going to help build trust.
I had a colleague send me a great example, again, outside of industry, but we did a podcast a couple of weeks ago talking about Rivian and some of the marketing that they do to prospective customers and how smart it is, where they're really leaning into, if you buy this Rivian product, you can go out and, go onto certain trails and, to get out into the wilderness and
Mm.
those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And after we did that, I had a colleague who owns a Rivian send me the monthly newsletter that they send. And it leaned into some of those aspects as well, but also had events that you could go to, events for your family. Obviously we're rolling into the holiday season. So it was, bring your kids and they can, make an ornament and, get together with other Rivian drivers and things like that. But I thought it was such a smart touch point and really falls in nicely, Christina, to this nurture campaign of, you wouldn't think about a car company really thinking about the touch points that they need to have with their customers on an ongoing basis, but they're really trying to build a long-term customer lifetime value with the folks that are using their product. I thought that was a really smart example.
Yeah, that's really good because I mean, my car personally, the next time I'm going to hear from my company is when I've paid it off, right? Time to buy another one.
Exactly. Yes.
Or there's a
Yeah, it's a perfect
recall.
example. That's a great point. I hadn't thought about the recall
Yeah.
notice. It's if you're if your only touch point is, to bring it back to a BSP example, if your only touch point with your customers is when there is an outage, that's a
Mhm.
negative customer touch point.
Yep.
In the car example that Christina just went through, if the only touch point that she has is a recall notice, that's a negative touch point. It undermines value in the product. So that's a really great, I love that correlation. I never thought about that before. And that's a great one. Okay, sorry. I'll move on to the next
No,
one.
you're good. So Gabe mentioned events a little bit. Great way to provide connection with your subscribers and brand loyalty. They don't have to be anything huge or elaborate. It can be a webinar educating on a certain topic. Maybe it's internet safety, Internet Safety Month in June. Cybersecurity Month was in October. So really lean into those silly holidays too. People love that. You can do local meetups at your office or customer appreciation events. I think I've seen some of your peers do free pictures with Santa at their office as an example, or come meet us at this local coffee shop for a cup of coffee on us, or we'll give you a coupon for a free donut if you come to this event. So there are a lot of great and easy and still low cost events that you can do to make sure that your subscribers are feeling the love and the attention. It gives them a sense of belonging. They can have shared values with others and like-minded in the community at these events too. Maybe they meet other families or other people that are very tech savvy and into, I don't know, esports could be an example.
Yeah, those are great examples. I even think too, taking it out of, you said webinars on here. Christina, you and I did Facebook Live events a
Yep.
few years ago, and that was really successful. So it doesn't
Mhm.
even necessarily have to be something that's in person. It can be something digital also that can
Mhm.
really start to build a lot of that same community. And the nice thing about the digital piece is it scales really well. So,
Yep.
with the Facebook Live, what was I forget what the biggest one we ever did was. It was like a few hundred people, maybe 600 or 700 people, if I remember, even
Mhm.
in a live setting. And then you have that resource that you can point people to in the future also.
Yep, and you can repurpose it for videos on YouTube and blogs and all sorts of things. So it's kind of a
Exactly.
multi-benefit.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. Christina, you want to speak to this one about NPS?
Yeah, so Net Promoter Score, NPS, is one simple question. It's would you refer us to a friend or family member? This is a really great way to measure how your subscribers feel about you. It is different than, customer satisfaction survey that is after a touch point, right? So I called in a tech support or I just had an install. So this gives you a really great insight into the satisfaction of your current subscribers. We've got some statistics and a couple, nuggets to take away here on the screen from a team at Calix who does a lot of market research. So just some things that are important as a result of a many Net Promoter Score surveys that they have conducted, how important, educating on Wi-Fi system is and reliability and what extra value you're adding. And of course, customer experience and ways to wow your subscribers. So beyond just a number and saying, oh, I scored a 55, right? This is actionable data to help improve the service that you're providing.
And if you've recently done an NPS survey and you have a set of people who fall into that, people fall into either a promoter, a detractor, or in that kind of neutral passive group. If you have people who fall into the promoter group, to go back to Christina's previous comment about referral programs, that's a great group of people to reach out to have them do some of that selling for you and maybe push them to that referral program. The other part that really jumps out to me over here on the right hand side is this the fact that NPS and loyalty tends to go down as tenure increases, which seems a little counterintuitive. You'd think that if people are sticking around for a longer time, they must be happy. But we find that that's usually not the case. And in the absence of a customer loyalty program, a sharp decline in customer loyalty can be observed. between that 2 to 3 year time frame. So you really start to see a significant decrease in NPS scores around that 2 to 3 year time after installation. People just forget. They don't remember how enthusiastic they were about the service that they originally bought unless we're constantly reminding them about that. So to that end, around customer journey, as Christina mentioned earlier, we in the industry tend to do a pretty good job around this bit, around thinking about what are the touch points that we have with customers at the beginning of the relationship. We don't do as great a job at the second half of this. It's really a tale of two halves. That initial setup and getting people onboarded versus what are the touch points that we have with them over time. And unfortunately, when they have a bad experience somewhere along this journey, then that ongoing experience, they're going to churn. They're going to start looking for a new service provider. So it's so important to think about what are all of these touch points that happen. If I have a customer that's sticking with me for 4 or 5 years, is the only touch point that happens with them in this entire time frame, this red time frame, is it my monthly bill? Is it, to go back to the conversation we were having earlier about outage notifications, or Christina's, I can't think of the term, recall notice? Is it that negative touch point, right? Or are there positive touch points? Are you nurturing folks through this longer term relationship also? We wanted to show a couple of really specific examples. This is leveraging the Calix Engagement Cloud, and I'm just going to play through this video. But there's just two kind of simple examples that we've leveraged here as a thinking about the marketing smarter, not harder. So in this particular example, we've built out a video showing customers who are on lower end service tiers, and we'll let this build out. So I'm grabbing kind of the lower end service tiers here. This is in this example, everybody that was below a 1 gig service. And then starting to look at, well, who are the people who are maybe not necessarily having a great experience? And looking at, in this case, what we would call a service limit hit, people who are bumping their head up against their current provision service tier. So we had 5,000 people in this network who were on a lower end service tier, in this case, 25 meg, who were not having a great experience. And we could also see that they were working from home. And in fact, in this particular example, around 2,200 of the 5,500 folks were in that work from home bucket. So with a handful of clicks, I've got a really targeted list that I could go create to market to these customers, to reach out to them proactively. Maybe it's a nurture campaign to help them understand how they could be using the service more effectively to work from home. Maybe it's also a soft upsell in that as well, helping them understand that our customers on our 500 meg service tier who are working remotely are generally much happier, those sorts of things. But what this allows you to do is, rather than having to communicate that out to your entire base, you can get much more targeted with who you're focused on. And then the next example here, oops, sorry, I went too far. The next example here is looking at identifying those customers that are at risk of churn. So one of the really key metrics that becomes super important when we're looking at churn risk is people who are running speed tests. People usually don't run speed tests when they're happy. They usually run speed tests when they think they're not getting what they're paying for. So again, we're looking at these customers who are running speed tests at some regular interval, who are on specific service tiers, and going in and identifying those in a proactive way. In this particular example, we're also looking at specific customer types. If I've got business customers that are paying me maybe an elevated service fee, for increased SLA or something like that, or faster speeds, I really want to make sure that I'm reaching out to those folks in a proactive way. So again, with a handful of clicks, I've gotten a list of business customers who are running speed tests frequently, who are on a distribution of service tiers that I want to reach out to in a proactive way. So again, that marketing smarter, not harder, leveraging the data and insight that we have within the network to really quickly identify those customers that are at risk so we can reach out to them in a proactive way. And to that end, we wanted to kind of wrap things up here around metrics that matter. And one of the most important metrics we believe is customer lifetime value. And this is something that I don't believe gets discussed enough in our industry. I'm a bit of a lunatic about it, so I talk about it all the time, but it is something that, it's it's a metric that I believe could be much more widely discussed in our industry. And oftentimes we talk to customers, broadband service providers who are tracking ARPU, they're tracking monthly churn rate, and those are critical parts of a customer lifetime value calculation. Just to walk through this quickly, the customer lifetime value is the dollars that you're earning from a customer over the entire lifetime of that relationship. And the way that you can very easily calculate this is by taking your monthly ARPU, dividing that into your monthly churn rate, and then multiplying that output from the formula times your gross margin percentage. You can certainly do it without the gross margin percentage piece if you want to as well, but it's the technical calculation here is ARPU divided by monthly churn rate times gross margin. What this does is it gives you an individual metric that kind of combines a lot of those really key metrics that you're probably looking at already, like ARPU and monthly churn rate. It also allows you to compare that customer lifetime value to your customer acquisition cost. Christine and I mentioned earlier that this is a very high cost of acquisition business that we operate in. If your customer lifetime value is $2,000 and your customer acquisition cost is $700, yes, you are making money. That is a profitable business, but that's a tough way to make a living. So understanding that relationship between customer acquisition cost and customer lifetime value becomes really important, and I think one of the most critical metrics that we have in the business. We also wanted to show kind of an AI prompt in action. We kind of talked through the formula here, but if you walk away from this conversation today and you can't remember exactly how to do the formula, I would certainly encourage you to use something like Copilot to actually do some of the calculations for you. So I've given a simple prompt here. I'm a broadband service provider. I want to understand how I can improve customer lifetime value and also how to calculate it. So it's given me a few different ways I can calculate it here. I can then input, some of my additional questions. What if I don't know my average customer lifetime? Can I do it based on churn rate? Yes, you can. Then I'm going to go ahead and give it the metrics here. So I'm going to say my ARPU is this, my churn rate is this, my gross margin percentage is this. What is my customer lifetime value? It's going to go off and do that calculation for me. So now I can see that I've got, in this example, $5,184 is my customer lifetime value. The other really cool thing about this is, again, if you forget some of the things that we talked about today, hey, if I'm looking to increase my customer lifetime value, what should I focus on? What's going to have the biggest impact? And in this case, it's churn. Churn has the biggest impact on customer lifetime value. And I've also gotten some recommendations here around how to focus on reducing churn. And some of them align nicely to some of the things that Christina was talking about earlier. Loyalty programs, better onboarding, proactive customer support, thinking about how we nurture that relationship with our customers. But I really like this idea of taking the actual calculation, having AI do some research for me, having it tell me what is going to have the biggest impact. If I change ARP, if I increase ARPU, if I decrease churn, if I increase my gross margin, what lever is going to have the biggest impact? And then what are some ways that I could impact that, which again, align to many of the things that we talked about today. Okay. We mentioned Calix Engagement Cloud earlier, but there's really a platform of solutions that our customers use to help support these activities. It is the systems that you see around the foundation of this, with Calix Cloud running over the top of it in the Calix Broadband platform. And then where we see our customers really being successful is leaning into those smart life managed services. Christina talked about Protect IQ and Experience IQ, the network security and parental control solutions. But our customers, again, who are really being successful are rolling these solutions out, and they're using it to differentiate from the competitors that we talked about earlier. And as we look to kind of wrap this up with just next steps and actions, one of the first things we would recommend is analyzing the competitors in your market. Good news is that I think everybody that was on this call is doing it and doing it at a frequency that we think really appropriate. That quarterly analysis is awesome. However, there's probably some benefits that you can get from leveraging AI to do some of that research for you, so you're not having to go do all of that heavy lifting yourself. We mentioned that there's a resource in the webinar here. Feel free to take that and start to leverage that within your business. Christine, I don't know if there's anything else you'd add to that from an AI prompt perspective.
I don't think so. I mean, I love using AI because it can kind of scour the internet for even promos. I think a lot of them vary so much even by town within your market that it's a good way to get a view without having to spend all your time clicking across websites and changing your location in your browser.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And do you mind talking through these next two because these really align nicely
Mhm.
to what you were talking about around loyalty as well as nurture
Yep.
campaigns and those sorts of things?
Yep. So after you've done your analysis, I maybe consider defining and documenting your touch points across the entire journey that Gabe shared. So yes, brand awareness, signing up, but what are we doing after? That includes those nurture campaigns, those referral programs, those events, and what do they look like? It could include even a phone call, right? So what does that look like? What do you want to add, tweak, fine tune? And after your audit, what is your gold star difference, right? So we know what our touch points are, we know what the competitors are doing, what makes us great. And then, of course, running a net promoter survey to help identify the promoters and detractors, and make actionable use case out of that data.
And again, if you've identified those promoters, if we understand the people who are really enthusiastic about your service, go back and leverage that from a referral perspective. It's a great opportunity to, make sure to again just leverage the great folks there that are excited about the service that you're selling. And then the last one here, really analyzing which loyalty driver can be easily rolled out. And we don't want you to walk away from this thinking that you need to do all of these things. If you get to that point at some point in the future, great. But think about which one could have the biggest impact in a relatively short period of time. Maybe it is that referral program. Maybe it is a simple nurture campaign to just continue to have those touch points with your customers. You're going to have to just figure out which one is going to be the most impactful for your business or the easiest to roll out. Pick one. Again, you don't need to start with all three. Focus on starting with one, and then start to roll some of those other ones out after. And then lastly, Susan mentioned it at the beginning, but myself and Zach Kilgore host the Buffering podcast. We talk about these things all the time. These are many of the conversations that we have on the podcast, bringing in customers that we work with, bringing in industry experts to have these conversations. So if you liked any of the conversation that we had today, please check out the Buffering podcast. And I think we have our last poll. Yes, Susan? I lost you, Susan.
Sorry, the tool is not being responsive to me.
Okay, no worries.
So here we go.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Well, thank you again. Thank you so much for everyone for joining us today. Susan Higgins, I'll hand it over to you to kind of wrap
Yep.
things up.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much for joining us. Everyone who has registered will actually receive an email with a link to the recording. And we hope that you guys all have a wonderful day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.